has just fallen 50 stories off the Faulkner building.
It's Faulkner himself.
Was it suicide?
Or was it murder?
Just say their names.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are the jurors who will try this case. At its close, you will retire to the jury room and vote upon your verdict. I instruct you to listen to the testimony carefully and pronounce your judgment to the best of your ability and integrity. You are to determine the fate of the defendant, and her fate rests in your hands. The district attorney may now proceed.
Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, on the 16th of January, near midnight, when the lights of Broadway blazed an electric dawn over the festive crowds below, the body of a man came hurtling through space and crashed, a disfigured mess, at the foot of the Faulkner building. That body had belonged to Bjorn Faulkner, Sweden's great financer. He fell 50 stories from his luxurious penthouse. A suicide, we were told. A great man, unwilling to bend before his imminent ruin. A man who found the fall from the roof of a skyscraper shorter and easier than a descent from his tottering throne of the world's financial dictator. A few months ago, behind every big transaction of gold in the world stood that well-known figure. Young, tall, with an arrogant smile, with kingdoms and nations in the palm of one hand and a whip in the other. If gold is the world's lifeblood, that Bjorn Faulkner, holding its dark, hidden arteries, regulating its ebb and flow, its every pulsation, was the heart of the world. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the world has just had a heart attack. And like all heart attacks, it came rather sudden. No one suspected the gigantic swindle that lay at the foundation of the Faulkner Enterprises. A few days after his death, the world shook from the crash of his business. Thousands of investors were stricken with the paralysis which follows after an attack. Bjorn Faulkner had a hard struggle facing the world, but he had an even harder struggle to face in his heart. A struggle which this case will have to uncover. Two women ruled his life and death, and here is one of them, ladies and gentlemen, Karen Andre, Faulkner's efficient secretary and notorious mistress. But 6 months ago, Faulkner came to America to get a loan and to save his fortune. But fate sent him a means to save his own heart. And the girl who is now his widow, Nancy Lee Faulkner, only daughter of John Graham Whitfield, our great philanthropist. Faulkner had thought he had found salvation and a new life in the virtuous innocence of his young bride. And the best proof of this is 2 weeks after his wedding, Faulkner dismissed his secretary, Karen Andre. He was through with her. But one is not easily through with a woman like Karen Andre. We can only imagine what hatred and revenge smoldered in her heart. And they leapt into flames on the night of January 16th. Bjorn Faulkner did not kill himself. He was murdered. Murdered by the very delicate and capable hands which you see before you. That, ladies and gentlemen, is what we are going to prove. Our first witness will be Dr. Kirkley.
Dr. Kirkland. You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God.
I do.
Kindly state your name.
Thomas Kirkland,
What is your occupation?
medical examiner of this county.
In the course of your duty, what were you called upon to do on the night of January 16th?
I was called to examine the body of Bjorn Faulkner.
What did you find?
A body, mangled to an extreme degree.
What did you establish as the cause of death?
All from a great height.
How long had Faulkner been dead when you examined his body?
I reached the body about half an hour after the fall.
Judging by the condition of the body, could you say exactly how long it had been dead?
No, I could not. Owing to the cold weather, the blood had coagulated immediately, which makes a difference of several hours impossible to detect.
Therefore, is it possible Faulkner could have been dead longer than half an hour?
It is possible.
Could his death have been caused by anything other than the fall?
I found no evidence of it.
For instance, had his skull been broken in before the fall? Could you tell by examining the body?
No, owing to the condition of the body, it would be impossible to determine.
That's all, Doctor.
Did you find any evidence of any such earlier wounds during your examination?
No, I did not.
Did you find any indication that death might have been caused by anything other than the fall?
No, I did not.
That's all.
John Hutchins.
John Hutchins. You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God.
I do.
And your occupation?
I'm the night watchman at the Faulkner building.
Did Mr. Faulkner have business offices in that building?
Yes, sir.
Do you know who lived in the penthouse of that building?
Certainly, sir. Mr. Faulkner did.
And who lived there?
Mr. Faulkner and Miss Andre lived there. That is, before the marriage.
And after the marriage?
After the marriage, Miss Andre lived there, alone.
Have you ever seen Mr. Faulkner calling on Miss Andre after his marriage?
Only once.
And that was?
On the night of January 16th.
Tell us about it, Mr. Hutchins.
Well, it was about 10:30
And
and
how do you know the time?
I come on duty at 10, sir. It was no more than half an hour after. The entrance doorbell rang. I went down to the lobby and opened the door. Mr. Faulkner and Miss Andre were at the door. I was surprised because Miss Andre has her own key, and usually she lets herself in.
Was she alone with Mr. Faulkner?
No, sir, there were two other gentlemen.
Who were they?
I don't know, sir.
Had you ever seen them before?
No, never.
What did they look like?
They were tall and sort of slender, both of them. One had sharp cheekbones, as I remember. The other one, I couldn't see his face on account of his hat being all crooked over his eyes. He must have had a bit too much, meaning no disrespect.
Just what do you mean?
Well, he was a bit tight. He wasn't very steady on his feet, so the other gentleman had to help him. They almost dragged him into the elevator.
Did Mr. Faulkner look worried?
No, sir, on the contrary, he looked very happy.
Did he look like a man contemplating suicide?
Your Honor, we object.
Objection sustained.
Did the others in the party seem happy too?
Yes, Miss Andre was smiling, and Faulkner laughed when they went up in the elevator.
Did you see them leave that night?
Yeah, the first one left about 10 minutes.
Who was that?
The drunken one. He came down in the elevator. He didn't seem so drunk no more. He could walk, but he staggered a little.
Did you see where he went?
Well, I wanted to help him seeing the condition he was in, but he saw me and he hurried out. He got into a car parked right at the entrance, and did he step on it. But cops must have got him.
What makes you think that?
Well, I saw a car that started right after.
What car? The defendant will please keep quiet.
If Miss Andre will let me satisfy your curiosity, I was just going to ask, what car, Mr. Hutchins?
A big black sedan. It was parked 2 cars away from him.
Who was in it?
I saw only one man.
What makes you think he was after the first car?
Well, I couldn't be sure he was, sir. It was just funny they started together like that.
Did you see any other guests of Miss Andre leaving that night?
Yes, it wasn't more than 15 minutes later when he came out of the elevator.
What did he do?
Nothing unusual. He seemed to be in a hurry. He went right out.
And then what happened?
I started on my round of the building. And it must have been an hour later. I heard screams outside in the street. I went down. As I came into the lobby, I saw Miss Andre running out of the elevator, sobbing wildly, her gown all torn. I ran after her. We pushed through the crowd outside, and there was Mr. Faulkner, all over the pavement.
What did Miss Andre do?
She screamed and fell on her knees. It was horrible, sir. I've never seen a body smashed like that.
That's all, Mr. Hutchins.
You said that you had never seen Mr. Faulkner calling on Miss Andre after his marriage, with the exception of that night. Now tell me, do you always see every visitor who comes into the building at night?
No, I'm not in the lobby all the time. I have my rounds to make. The guest has a key. He can come right in, and I wouldn't see him at all.
In other words, Miss Andre might have had any number of visitors, Mr. Faulkner included, whom you never saw come in.
Yes, sir. Quite right.
That is all.
Van Fleet,
Occupation?
private investigator,
What was your last assignment?
shadowing Mr. Bjorn Faulkner
By whom were you hired to do it?
by Mrs. Faulkner.
Were you shadowing Mr. Faulkner on the night of January 16th?
I was.
Kindly tell us about it.
I'll start with 6:13 p.m.
And exactly how do you know the time?
Part of my duties had to record it and report back to Mrs. Faulkner.
I see.
6:13 p.m. Mrs. Faulkner leaves home. Mr. Faulkner leaves home on Long Island. Wears formal dress suit, drives car himself, alone. Special notation, unusual speed all the way to New York.
Where does Mr. Faulkner go?
He drives up to the Faulkner building and goes in. It is now 7:57 p.m. All offices closed. I wait outside of my car. 9:35 p.m. Mr. Faulkner comes out with Miss Andre. Miss Andre is dressed formal. Special notation. Miss Andre is wearing a corsage of orchids of unusual proportions. They drive away.
Where do they go?
No one is perfect in this world.
What do you mean?
I mean, I lost track of them. Due to Mr. Faulkner's speed and to an accident.
What accident?
My left fender crashing into a truck. Damages for which charged to Mrs. Faulkner.
What did you do when you lost track of them?
Returned to the Faulkner building and waited.
When did they return?
They returned at 10:30 p.m. exactly. The gray car follows them. Mr. Faulkner gets out and helps Miss Andre. While she rings the bell, he opens the door of the gray car. A tall gentleman in formal clothes steps out, and together they help out a third gentleman. The latter, wearing a dark gray sport coat. Special notation. The aforementioned gentleman shows signs of inebriation. They all go into the Faulkner building.
Then what did you do?
Left my car and went into Gary's Grill. I must explain that I take nourishment every 4 hours, and 4 hours had elapsed since we left Long Island. I sat at the window and watched the Faulkner entrance door.
What did you observe?
Nothing for 15 minutes. Then the man in the gray coat comes out. In a hurry, obviously. He gets in his car and drives south.
Did you see the other stranger leave?
Yes, 10 minutes later, he gets into a car which sits at the curb. I don't know how it got there, but there it is. And he seems to have the keys, where he gets in and drives away, south.
Have you ever seen Mr. Faulkner with these two men before?
No, first time I ever saw them.
What did you do when they left?
I wait. Mr. Faulkner is now alone up in the penthouse with Miss Andre. I'm curious, professionally. I have a special observation post. I'd used it before.
And where is that?
At the Skytop, nightclub of the Brooks building, just 3 stories away, or 3 buildings away, pardon me. Off the dance floor, you go out, you can see the Faulkner penthouse clear as the palm of your hand. I look out, I yell.
What did you see?
No lights. Karen Andre's white gown shimmering in the moonlight. She's hoisting a man's body up on the parapet. A man in evening clothes. Faulkner, he's unconscious. She pushes him with all her strength. There's no resistance. He goes over the parapet, down into space.
Then what do you do?
I rush back into the dining room, yell about what I'd seen. The crowd follows me down to the entrance of the Faulkner building. And there is Miss Andre, sobbing over it, fit to move a first-night audience.
Did you speak to her?
No, the police arrive and report as I've said here.
Your witness.
Can you kindly tell us, Mr. Van Fleet, when you started in the employ of Mrs. Faulkner?
October 13th last.
Can you tell us the date of Mr. and Mrs. Faulkner's wedding?
October 12th, the day before.
Exactly. Just the day before. In other words, Mrs. Faulkner hired you to spy on her husband the day after their wedding?
So it seems.
What were Mrs. Faulkner's instructions when you were hired?
To watch every action of Mr. Faulkner and report in detail.
Any special attention to Miss Andre?
None.
Now, Mr. Van Fleet, if you would so kindly answer me. Had Mr. Faulkner been calling on Miss Andre after his marriage?
Yes, frequently.
In the daytime?
Seldom.
Now, Mr. Van Fleet, did you report this to Mrs. Faulkner?
I did.
And can you tell us what her reaction to these reports were?
Mrs. Faulkner is a lady, and as such, she has no reactions.
Did she seem worried?
I don't believe believe so. Mr. Faulkner was the most devoted of husbands.
Just how do you know that?
Those were Mrs. Faulkner's own words.
Now, Mr. Van Fleet, can you kindly tell us exactly what time you started for the Skytop nightclub on the evening of January 16th?
At 11:32 exactly.
How long a walk is it from the Faulkner building to the Skytop?
3 minutes.
And what time was it when you came out to the balcony on the Skytop?
11:57.
So it took you exactly 25 minutes to get to the balcony. What were you doing the rest of the time?
Of course, they have a dance floor at the Skytop, and other things.
Did you take advantage of the other thing?
Well, I just had a couple of drinks, if I understand the drift of your curiosity. But it doesn't mean you can say I was intoxicated.
I've said nothing of the kind, as yet. Now, you said that you saw Miss Andre pushing Mr. Faulkner off the road, and it was a little distance away, in the darkness, and you were, well, shall we say you just had a few drinks?
The drinks had nothing to do with it.
Are you quite certain she was pushing him? Isn't it possible she was struggling with him?
Well, it's a funny way of struggling. If I were struggling with a man, I wouldn't be hoisting him up by his... I wouldn't be hoisting him up by me.
Mr. Van Fleet, what were Mrs. Faulkner's instructions to you when you came here to testify?
I received no instructions of any kind. I may inform you that Mrs. Faulkner is not here to instruct me were she inclined to do so. She's been taken to California by her father to rest her shattered nerves.
Mr. Van Fleet, do you think that Mr. Faulkner's suicide is very flattering to Mrs. Faulkner?
We object!
Objection sustained.
Mr. Van Fleet, do you know how much a witness to Mr. Faulkner's murder would be worth to Mrs. Faulkner?
Your Honor, we object!
Objection sustained.
I should like to remind Mr. Stevens that he may be sued for making insinuations such as these.
I made no insinuation. I merely asked a question in a general way.
Well, I would like to inform you, in a general way, that perjury is not part of private investigators' duties.
No special notations to the rule?
None!
That is all.
Not quite. I want you to ask him 2 more questions, Stevens.
Certainly, Miss Andre. What are the questions? What kind of a car do you drive, Mr. Van Fleet?
A brown Buick, 2-door sedan. Last year's model, old but serviceable.
Did you notice any car following the gentleman in the gray coat as he drove away, Mr. Van Fleet?
I don't believe so. The traffic was quite heavy at the time.
That's all.
Inspector Sweeney.
Inspector Sweeney.
You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God. I do.
Your name?
Elmer Sweeney,
Your occupation?
Inspector of Police.
On the night of January 16th, were you called upon to investigate Bjorn Faulkner's death?
Yes, I was one of the first officers to reach the spot.
Did you question Miss Andre?
Not right away. Before I could do anything, that fellow Van Fleet rushed up to me and yelled that he had seen Karen Andre throw Faulkner off the roof.
How did Miss Andre react to this?
She was stunned. She stood there, her eyes wide, fit to burst. And then, cross my heart, sir, she started laughing. I thought she went crazy.
What did you do?
I ordered her held for questioning, and we took her up with us in the elevator to the penthouse. What a joy.
Did you find anything unusual?
Unusual, yes. The bedroom.
Ah, and what did you find in the bedroom?
Nightgowns, sir. Lace nightgowns. Just about made of thin air. Crystal bathtub in the bathroom. And I turned the shower on, and it was perfumed.
You misunderstood my question, Inspector. I wasn't referring to the aesthetic value of the penthouse. I was asking whether you found anything pertaining to Bjorn Faulkner's death.
Yes, in the living room.
And what was that?
A letter lying in plain sight. It was sealed and address said, "To whomsoever finds it first."
Is this the letter?
historian wants to record my last advice to humanity, I'll say that I found only two enjoyable things on this earth as every door was open to me. Highway Profiterole and Karen Andre. To those who can use it, the advice is worth what it has cost mankind. Bjorn Faulkner.
Submitted as evidence.
Accepted as Exhibit A.
Did you question Miss Andre about this letter?
I did. She said that Faulkner wrote the letter and left it there and ordered her not to touch it. Then he went out to the roost garden. She struggled with him when she saw what he was going to do, but she couldn't stop him.
Did you ask her who had been with them that night?
I did. She said two other gentlemen had, and she had never seen them before. Mr. Faulkner picked them up in a nightclub that night. She said their names were Jerry White and Dick Saunders.
Did you search for any gentlemen of these names among Mr. Faulkner's acquaintances?
We did. We found that no one had ever heard of them.
And Miss Andre told you, as she did at the inquest, that she had never seen these two men before.
Yes, sir.
Was she very emphatic about that?
Yes, sir. Very.
That's all, Inspector.
Miss Andre told you that she had struggled with Faulkner to prevent his suicide. Did you notice any evidence of a struggle in her clothing?
Yes. Her dress was torn. It had diamond shoulder straps, and one of them broke, so that she had to hold the dress up with one hand.
And what did you think of that?
Do I have to answer that?
You certainly do.
Well, I wish she had broken the other strap, too.
I meant, did you think as though her clothing looked as though it were torn in a struggle?
It looked like it, yes, sir.
Now, can you tell us why on earth you turned the shower on in the bathroom?
Well, you see, we heard that Faulkner had wine instead of water in it.
You mustn't believe all the rumors you hear about Bjorn Faulkner. That is all.
Magda Svensson.
Magda Svensson. You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So, I swear.
What is your name?
You know it. You just call me
Kindly answer my questions without argument. State your name.
Magda Svensson.
What is your occupation?
I am housekeeper
By whom were you last employed?
by Herr Bjorn Faulkner, and before that, his father.
How long have you been employed by them?
I've been in the family 38 years. I remember Herr Bjorn since he was a little child.
When did you first come to America?
I've been here 5 years.
What were your duties Mr. Faulkner assigned to you?
I keep penthouse for him. He visit here every year or so. I stay even after he go when we get married, but I never employed by this one.
Now, Mrs. Svensson.
Miss Svensson?
I beg your pardon. Miss Svensson. What do you know of Miss Andre's relations with Mr. Faulkner?
Decent woman like me should know about such things, but sin is shameless in this world.
Tell us about it, Miss Svensson.
From very first day this woman appeared, she was linked with Herr Faulkner. It is a good thing when a man forgets the line between his bed and his desk, and she put her claws tight on both. Sometimes they talked loans and dividends in bed. Other times, the door to his office was locked and under the window shades that was pulled down. I seen her lace pants on the windowsill.
Your Honor, we object.
I think Miss Andre should have objected many years ago.
Such a line of testimony is outrageous.
These are facts pertaining to the vital question of their relationship and...
Silence, gentlemen! I shall ask the witness who heard her testimony more carefully.
when Miss Andre's conduct was detrimental to Mr. Faulkner in ways other than moral?
I do so. You try to count up all money you waste on that woman.
Can you tell us an instance of Mr. Faulkner's extravagance?
He had a platinum gown made for her. Yes, I said platinum. Fine mesh, fine and soft as silk, she wore on her naked body. He would make a fire in the fireplace, and he would heat the dress, and then put it on her. It cooled, and you can see her body in silver sheen. And it had been more decent if she'd been naked. And she asked to put it on as hot as she could stand. And if it burned her shameless skin, she laughed like the pagan she is. And he kissed the burn, wild like tiger.
Your Honor, we object. This testimony is irrelevant and only tends to prejudice the jury against Miss Andre.
Let her talk, Stephen. Perhaps it may prejudice the jury in my favor.
Mr. Stevens has my sympathy. This client is not an easy one to handle.
Silence! Objection overruled.
Did you observe Mr. Faulkner's attitude toward his marriage?
He was happy for the first time in his life. He was happy like a decent man who found right road.
Did you know of anything that made him worry in those days that could bring him to suicide eventually?
No, nothing.
Now tell us, Miss Benson, did you observe Miss Andre's attitude toward Mr. Faulkner's marriage?
She's silent, like stone.
Mrs. Faulkner!
I understand you wanted to call me as a witness, Mr. Flint?
I did, Mrs. Faulkner, but I thought you were in California.
I was. I escaped.
You escaped?
Father was concerned over my health. He wouldn't allow me to come back. But I wanted to do my duty towards the memory of my husband. I'm at your disposal, Mr. Flint.
I can only express my deepest appreciation, Mrs. Faulkner. If you will take a seat, we will be with you shortly.
Thank you.
Now, Miss Benson, you were telling us of Miss Andre's attitude toward Mr. Faulkner's marriage.
I said she keeps silent, but I hear her crying one night after marriage. Crying, sobbing, and that's the first and only time in her life.
Did she seem to suffer much?
Suffer? No, not her. One man more or less makes no such difference to her. I seen her unfaithful to Herr Faulkner on the night of his wedding.
Unfaithful? With who?
I don't know the man. I seen him first time the night of Herr Faulkner's wedding.
Tell us about it.
I gone to wedding. Oh, it was beautiful. My poor Herr Bjorn, so handsome, and the young bride, all white and lovely as lily. I cried like a little young children. But she would not go to wedding.
Did Miss Andre stay at home?
She stayed home. I come back early. I come in servant's door. She not hear me come. She was home, but she was not alone.
Who was with her?
He was, the man out on the roof in the garden. He holding her, and I think he want to crush her bones. He bent her back so far, I think she fall into her reflection in the pool. And then he kissed her, and I think he never get his lips off hers.
And then?
She step aside and say something. I cannot hear. She speak very soft. He not say word.
Did you ever learn the name of that man?
No.
Did you ever see him again?
Yes, once.
And when was that?
The night of January 16th.
Tell us about it, Miss Benson. Will you kindly tell us about it, Miss Benson?
Well, she very strange that day. She called me and said I have the rest of the day off, and I've been suspicious.
Why did that make you suspicious?
My day off is Thursday, and I not asked for second day. So I said I not need day off. And she didn't need me, so I went.
What time did you go?
About 4 o'clock, but I want to know secret. I come back.
When did you come back?
About 10 at night. The house was dark. She not home, so I wait. Half hour after, I see them come. I seen Herr Faulkner with her, so I afraid to stay. But before I go, I seen two gentlemen with them. One gentleman, he drunk. I not know him.
Did you know the other gentleman?
The other one, he was tall and lanky and had sharp cheekbones. He was the man I seen kissing Miss Andre.
That's all, Miss Svensson.
Just a minute, Miss Svensson. You still have to have a little talk with me.
For what? I say all I know.
You may know the answers to a few more questions. Now, you said it was dark that time you saw the stranger kissing Miss Andre?
Yes, I did.
And you said that you saw that stranger kissing her in the dark?
Yes, it was dark.
Now, on the night of January 16th, when you were so ingeniously spying on your mistress, you saw her come in with Mr. Faulkner, and you hurried to depart in order not to be caught. Am I correct?
You have a good memory.
You just had a swift glance at the two gentlemen with them.
Yes.
Can you tell us what the drunken gentleman looked like?
How can I? No time to notice face and too dark a door.
So it was too dark, and you were in a hurry, and yet you were able to identify a man you had seen but once before.
Let me tell you, mister, I respect oath, and I'm religious women, and I respect oath. But I said it was the same man, and I say it again.
That is all. Thank you, Miss Spence.
Mrs. Faulkner.
You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God. I do.
What is your name?
Nancy Lee Faulkner.
What were your relations with the late Bjorn Faulkner?
I was his wife.
I realize how painful this is to you, Mrs. Faulkner, but I'm going to have to ask you many questions that will awaken sad memories.
I am ready, Mr. Flint.
When did you first meet Bjorn Faulkner?
In August of last year,
Where did you meet him?
at a ball given by my friend, Sandra Van Rensselaer, in Newport.
Will you kindly tell us about it, Mrs. Faulkner?
Sandra had introduced us. I remember she said, "Here's a tough one for you, Nancy. I wonder whether you'll add this scalp to the well-known collection." She had always insisted on exaggerating my popularity. I danced with him that night. We danced in the garden, under the trees, and stopped at the edge of the pool. We were alone in the darkness, with the faint sound of the blue Danube walls filling the silence. Mr. Faulkner had reached out to pick a rose for me. As he tore it off, his hand brushed my bare shoulder. I don't know why, but I blushed. He noticed and apologized, graciously smiling. Then he took me back to the guests. I think we both felt a silent understanding, for we did not dance again with each other that night.
When did you see Mr. Faulkner again?
3 days later, I invited him to dine at my home on Long Island. It was a real Swedish meal, and I cooked it myself.
Did you see him often after that?
Yes, quite often. His visits became more and more frequent until the day
Until the day?
he proposed to me.
Kindly tell us about it, Mrs. Faulkner.
We went driving, Mr. Faulkner and I, alone. It was a beautiful day with a bright, cold sunshine. I was driving my car, and I felt so young, so happy, that I grew reckless. I'm sorry. It's a little hard for me to remember those days. I was reckless. Reckless enough to lose our way. We stopped on a strange country road. I laughed and said, "I've kidnapped you, and I won't release you." He answered, "The ransom you want is not in circulation." Then, suddenly, he seized my hand, looking straight at me, and said, "What's the use of pretending? I love you, Nancy."
I'm so sorry, Miss Faulkner. If you wish to be dismissed now, continue tomorrow.
Thank you. I'm all right. I can go on. It was then that I first learned about the desperate state of Mr. Faulkner's fortune. He said he had to tell me the truth, that He could not ask me to marry him when he had nothing to offer me. But I loved him, so I told him that money had never meant anything to me.
Did Mr. Faulkner feel hopeless about his future at the time your engagement was announced?
No, not at all. He said that my faith in him and courage helped him so much. I made him realize that it was his duty, our duty to the world that he had wronged, not to ourselves. I made him realize his mistakes, and he was ready to atone for them. We were entering a new life together, a life of devotion to the service and welfare of others.
Did you remain in New York after your wedding?
Yes, we made our home in my Long Island penthouse. Mr. Faulkner gave up his New York penthouse.
Did Mr. Faulkner tell you of his relations with Miss Andre?
No, not then, but he did, 2 weeks after our marriage. He came to me and said, "Dearest, there was a woman, and I feel I must tell you about her." I told him, "I know it. You don't have to say a word if you'd rather not, dear."
And what did Mr. Faulkner tell you?
He said, "Karen Andre is the cause and symbol of my darkest years, and I am going to dismiss her."
What did you answer?
I said that I understood and that he was right. But I said, "Perhaps we must not be cruel. Perhaps you could give her another position." He said that he'd provide for her financially, but that he never wanted to see her again.
He, therefore, dismissed Miss Andre voluntarily of his own choice?
Mr. Flint, there are two types of women in this world, and my kind is never jealous of the other.
What was Mr. Faulkner's business situation after your wedding?
I'm afraid I don't understand much about business, but I know that my father made a loan, a very large loan to my husband.
Mrs. Faulkner, will you tell us whether you think it is possible that your husband committed suicide?
I think it totally impossible.
Did he ever speak of his plans for the future?
We used to dream of the future together, even on the evening before his death. We were sitting by the fire in his study, talking about the years ahead. We knew we would not be wealthy for long, if ever, but we didn't care about that. We had renounced material concerns with all their consequences: pride, selfishness, ambition. It is the desire to rise above our fellow men. We were planning to devote our life to spiritual values. We were going to leave the city, to be part of some modest community, to be like everyone else.
And this was on the night of January 15th, the day before his death?
Yes.
What did Mr. Faulkner do on the day of January 16th?
He spent it in town, on business, as usual. He came home late in the afternoon and told me he had a business banquet to attend to in New York. He did not have dinner at home. He left about 6 o'clock.
What banquet was Mr. Faulkner supposed to attend?
He didn't tell me. I didn't ask. I never made it a point to interfere with his business.
Did you notice anything peculiar when he said goodbye to you that night?
No, not a thing. He kissed me and said he tried to come home early. I stood there and watched as he drove away. He waved to me as his car disappeared in the dusk. I stood there for a few moments, thinking of how happy we were, and what a perfect dream our love had been, like a delicate idol. Like, I didn't know that indirectly, through jealousy, our beautiful romance would bring about his death.
Your Honor, we object. Move that that be stricken out.
The witness's last sentence may go out.
Thank you, Mrs. Faulkner. That is all.
Will you be able to answer a few questions now, Mrs. Faulkner?
As you wish, Mr. Stevens.
You said that your romance was like a perfect dream, didn't you?
Yes,
A sacred trust that regenerated a soul.
yes,
A beautiful, uplifting relationship based on mutual trust.
yes.
Then why did you hire a detective to spy on your husband?
I didn't hire a detective to spy on my husband. I hired him to protect Mr. Faulkner.
Will you kindly explain that?
Well, you see, some time ago, Mr. Faulkner had been threatened by a gangster. That's Reagan, I believe that they call him that. Mr. Faulkner paid no attention to it. No one could intimidate him. But he even refused to hire a bodyguard. I was worried. So, as soon as we were married, I hired the detective, Van Fleet, to watch him. I thought that I did it secretly because I thought I would not attack a man who was constantly being watched.
So, how could a sleuth following at a detective protect Mr. Faulkner?
Well, you see, I thought that they would not attack a man who was constantly being watched. The underworld has a way of figuring out those things.
So all Mr. Van Fleet had to do was to watch Mr. Faulkner?
Yes.
Mr. Faulkner alone?
Yes.
Not Mr. Faulkner and Miss Andre?
Mr. Stevens, that supposition is insulting to me.
I haven't noticed you sparing any insults, Mrs. Faulkner.
I'm sorry, Mr. Stevens. I assure you that was not my intention.
Now, you said that Mr. Faulkner told you he never wanted to see Miss Andre again.
Yes, he did.
And yet, he called on her after his marriage. He called on her often, and at night. Your detective told you that, didn't he?
Yes, I knew it.
How do you explain it?
I cannot explain it. How could I know what blackmail she was holding over his head?
How do you explain the fact that Mr. Faulkner lied to you about the business banquet on the night of January 16th and went directly to Miss Andre's house?
If I could explain that, Mr. Stevens, I might be the sated father of this trial. We would have an explanation of my husband's mysterious death. All I know is that she made him come to her house for some reason which he could not tell me, and that he was found dead that night.
Mrs. Faulkner, I want you to answer just one more question.
Yes.
I want you to state here, under oath, that Bjorn Faulkner loved you.
Bjorn Faulkner was mine.
That is all.
No, that's not all. Ask her one more question, Stevens.
Of course.
Ask her whether she loved him.
I did, Miss Andre.